What's up everybody, Coach Mills here, and in this video I'm going to be giving you at least one tip to counter every single agent in the game. That's right, so if you've been getting farmed by Killjoy, Raze, or any character, we got a tip for you in this video. But before we get started, if you never want to go bald, then you have to smash that fat like and subscribe. That's right, for a limited time offer, we're going to give you baldness protection for life, because if you're anything like me, you would look absolutely awful bald. And I mean, are you really willing to take the risks? So what are you waiting for? Smash the like and subscribe, but let's just jump right into it. Now, the first character that I'm sure is most likely just in every single one of the games you're playing recently, and it's Killjoy. And yes, the biggest thing that you have to do up against Killjoy is clear her nanoswarm. Now, we can't break down every single nanoswarm spot on Killjoy, but realize that nanoswarm could be in front of wherever you're planting behind or behind it. Now, typically, if you're planting on a spot, remember that default plant zones are going to be more likely to be trapped with nanoswarm, so definitely keep that in mind. That could be a way that they could really mess up your plant and even get a kill on you if you're already low. Now, if you plant to defuse, it's almost assured that if a Killjoy was there, she set up her nanoswarm in some way. So using damage abilities like Shock Arrow could be a quick way to clear around the spike, just to make sure that there's none around, so you don't have to go up and look for it. You can just clear it right away before she even activates it. Now, as an additional tip against Killjoy, this is up against her ult. Now, if you're somewhere in the center area of the ult, right when Killjoy activates it, she will assume that people are immediately relocating, but you do have a pretty large window of time. So if you actually just hold a powerful positioning, a lot of times enemies or even Killjoy herself will peek out and you can get an opportunity to kill her instead of just running into her trap trying to flush yourself out of the area. So you do have time. Use it as a resource, try to turn the tables on a Killjoy, and then you'll definitely have enough time to whip out your knife and then run to safety after the Killjoy ran into you, because most Killjoys won't just like wait or hide in a corner until the entire Killjoy ult activates. She will usually push out a little bit aggressively, assuming that you already dispersed or that her ultimate already created space. Now moving on to the next character on our list, your favorite character is Raze. No, just kidding. Everyone hates dying to Raze, so let's give you a couple of tips and tricks to use against her. If your team is hiding in a close position, let's say he's hiding with the shorty, he's hiding across or whatever, you as the other player really should try to draw the aggro by shooting the boombot if he comes y'all's way. It is basically a death sentence. If your teammate is hiding in an aggressive angle and the boombot tags him, that teammate is gonna die. Like, if enemies know exactly where he is, he's gonna die if he has to shoot it. So if you can shoot it, that can be really, really good, because not only does it protect him, but it also kind of takes away some of the aggro from him hiding there. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, whenever you see a blast pack anywhere, if a blast pack is in the middle of the ground, enemy Raze throws it on the ground, just shoot it right away. Always shoot blast packs. You don't want Raze to launch it on her terms, because that's always going to be better than you detonating before. So realize that you can shoot them, and whenever you see them, no matter where they are, always shoot them. Now lastly, versus her ultimate, one big problem that happens a lot is everyone will run sometimes in the same direction, and that's how a Raze gets a double or triple kill. Now I'm going to tell you how a Raze never gets a double or triple kill if one person stands their ground and tries to kill the Raze. Now, you don't want the entire team to stay in their ground unless they're really far apart, but if you can stand your ground, kill the Raze but die, you trade one life for one life, but she used her ultimate, so realistically that's a net positive for you. So don't really be afraid. I know that you want to live and you're kind of selfishly motivated, right? But if you're talking about winning the game for your team and having the most team impact and maybe the highest chance to win the game, don't be afraid to stand your ground, kill that Raze, trade her one for one, but that's still a net positive like I said before. Now moving on to the next character we got to talk about, and it's Jett. And Jett is becoming one of the most powerful characters in the meta right now, especially with an op, because Tailwind just gets her out of any situation. Realistically, she could play hyper aggressive and then just Tailwind out. So baiting Jett's Tailwind is one of the most important things you can do up against Jett. And it's very, very important that you call it to your entire team, because the way that you play against a Jett that has Tailwind will be fundamentally different. She could be playing a more aggressive sniper angle. She could be playing in a cubby or whatever. Unless this Jett doesn't have Tailwind, you got to expect a lot of other types of playstyles from this Jett. Now on top of that, generally against Jetts, realize that Jetts love to play vertical, hard scoping angles on defense. For example, if you watch any of Wardell's videos, let's say you watch it on Bind, right? Sometimes he'll be playing low, then he'll be playing high on top of boxes, then he'll be playing like middle boxes crouched. He likes to mess with the verticality of where he's holding, so don't assume that they're just going to be holding one angle all the time. Jetts really like to mix it up, and if you ever hear an updraft craft as you're going onto point, assume that she is hiding somewhere up on one of the high grounds. Also, it could be a bait, so just be more prepared for anything realistically. Now, moving on to the next character we got to talk about, it's Cypher. And if you flank against an enemy, right, you're planning on flanking an enemy, but there's a trap, what you should be doing is you can creep all the way up to the trap, but don't break it. Hold that angle because you haven't broke it yet. Enemies are going to kind of think that that area is clear, so if they rotate, you can catch them off. But if your team push into point, you can break the trap wire and push it at the same time. First off, the distraction of your team is going to make it less likely that the Cypher notices. And second off, you're going to be engaging at the same time, so at least they have to kind of deal with enemies on both sides of them. It's far better to time those kind of things instead of just breaking the trap, trying to go in, but then they can send all their attention at you, and then you die and they can flip their attention to the other side. So definitely try to time that well with your team. Now, something else that commonly happens up against a Cypher is players will just avoid his side a lot. They'll be like, I don't want to push it to a Cypher, so they just avoid his point altogether. That is really not the strategy that pros incorporate, and that's not what you should be incorporating either. You realistically want to be pressuring that Cypher out, breaking his trap, forcing him to use a utility, breaking his camera, or putting pressure on his sight. Because the thing is, as long as that Cypher's alive, the enemy don't have to fear that much about you pushing that point because they have the cam. The Cypher is way more likely to lurk. So realistically, you actually should be pushing the Cypher's point more, just being really diligent about clearing out their traps, not falling for his plays, instead of just avoiding it altogether. That puts so much flexibility on them. That makes it less likely for you to rotate because, like I said, they can set up the cam and they still have all the traps. So realistically, even if you plan to push the other site, you should still try to clear off all the utility and stuff on Cypher's point. And enemies are going to actually rotate to Cypher's point a lot faster than the other way around because there's no constant flow of information. So definitely keep that in mind. Now, the next character we have to talk about is Omen. And keep in mind that Omen only has one paranoia. So just like with some of the other abilities we talked about, like Tailwind and things like that, it's really good to track the first one and call out when he doesn't have it because it can dramatically change some of the matchups around. Now, also specifically for the map Bind, tons of teleports can be fake, and Omens love to do this where they'll do that fake teleport where they will telly out of the teleport as they jump in it. That can happen very often against an Omen, so realistically keep that in mind. Now, also something about Omen specific teleport is it makes a much bigger sound when he starts the teleport, but you actually can hear where the Omen teleports to. It is just very faint, and I know the audio is not that good in Valorant, and if other things are going on, it's going to be really hard to hear. But keep in mind that if you really are listening, you will know the general area that he teleported to. So that could definitely help you when you're trying to predict where he went or whether it was a bait or anything like that. Now, moving on to the next character we gotta talk about Sage. And what you should be doing first and foremost is punish Sages who wall early. Sometimes Sages will wall right off the bat. They'll wall right away when you push up. Now, what I mean by punish is you can quickly rotate off after she already invested the wall. You can also just break the wall and put additional pressure, waste her resources. A lot of Sages will realistically do this far too soon, and honestly, you could trade like 20 seconds of the clock for an entire ability that is a really powerful one, and it's definitely worth it. So punish Sages who are a little bit over eager with their Sage wall. Sometimes you could even just make a whole bunch of noise as a solo person and a Sage will still wall it. Now, another thing that you should do up against Sage, especially if you're playing a character like Brimstone, is really know where enemies die, because if Sage tries to make a res play, you can ult both of them into oblivion as long as you track where specific enemies die on the map. The second that that player gets res, you'll see it in the top right, you can coordinate it with the place that they died and just ult them and get a double kill. It's pretty easy stuff, but it does require you to really keep in mind where every single enemy character died. Now, the next thing you need to think about is all the Sage wall up spots. There's a whole bunch of them that can really catch you off guard. Like, imagine Ascent. If you are on defense peeking from Cat, yes, you can hold the angle first unless someone walls them up near their spawn. There's a box that enemies can get walled up on, and they can actually hard scope you before you hard scope them. If you don't learn all these Sage walls, you're gonna get caught off guard all over the place, specifically on Ascent, but even other maps. You need to really be playing around these things, and the only way to do that is to learn them all. If you want a video that breaks down all the crazy Sage wall techs, because there is a lot of them, definitely let me know in the comments down below and I could start on that. But for now, just realize that there is a lot of ways that Sage could use her walls but for now, just the obvious ones, make sure that you're playing around them and thinking about them. Now moving on to the next character we gotta talk about, it's Phoenix. And you gotta be really careful when an enemy puts a smoke in your choke point. You see, smoking their own entrance doesn't make any sense unless they're either 1, trying to make you think that they're rotating off, like cutting off information, or 2, setting up a Phoenix flash outside of smoke, because everyone knows that that was the meta for a little while, because a Phoenix flash, the tail gets pretty much completely blocked off, so it just pops out of the smoke, instantly flashes you. Now, you're not gonna have enough time to react to this type of smoke. You're not gonna be able to 180, so you gotta be really careful. Make sure that you're playing in a position where you can jiggle behind cover when the enemy has smoked their own entrance onto point. Otherwise, you're gonna just be standing, looking at the smoke, waiting for enemies to pop out. You're gonna get flashed before you can turn around and you're gonna die. So definitely keep that in mind. Now, as another tip up against Phoenix ult, you really should be relaying to your partner what your plan is when the enemy come in with the Phoenix ult. If you're planning on running, tell your teammate that you're gonna run. If you're planning on standing your ground, tell your teammate you're gonna stand your ground. It's really important that you're on the same page, because focus fire is the best way to shut down an enemy that is just pushing right at you. So definitely, you gotta relay that to your teammates. Now, the last tip I have against Phoenix is if you ever see Flame on the ground, you know, his flame that he throws on the ground in order to heal up, just assume that he's there, because if a Phoenix ever was low enough to actually invest that, he is not going to be full from his ability. It's not going to get him to full unless he has very little damage taken. So it's not like he's going to throw it down and then suddenly leave, right? He's going to be in there almost for the entire duration. So just assume that he's in there and full swing it as if there was a player there, and like 99% of the time he's going to be there. So just keep that in mind. That just has to do with how much it heals per how much it takes for it to heal, which means it's just going to be in it the entire time. Now, moving on to the next character on the list, we got Reyna. The first thing that you need to understand about going up against Reyna is it's actually good if you force her to use her intangible ability, her reposition ability. And you might be asking, why would I want her to use that? Well, if you let her take isolated duels, she gets a kill, takes a whole bunch of damage, and then heals, takes a duel, kills that person, heals, she could just keep doing that again, like a snowball, right? So you don't want her to be able to do that. You want her to be able to like take a whole bunch of damage, be forced to relocate, which is at 20 HP. That is the best case scenario besides just insta headshotting her. Now, in order to force this to happen, you really should be actually playing closer together when an enemy Reyna is coming in on you. So against a lot of characters, or just in general, you want to be playing different angles, right? But up against a Reyna in particular, you do not want her to be able to take isolated duels. So let's say you have the spike planted. You either don't want to peek her at all until she starts to defuse and then peek her simultaneously, or you want to be holding similar angles to where the Reyna cannot possibly get in a 1v1. She never ever can get in a 1v1. Otherwise, like I said, she can get a kill, heal up, get a kill, heal up, and then she'll always be at a full fighting force, which is just going to be terrible for you. That's why Reyna's so good at retaking. But that also means up against this hero, you could dramatically change the way that you hold, and you'll have a lot better time. Now, moving on to the next character we got to talk about, we have to talk about Sova. Now, the best thing that you could do up against Recon Arrow is actually just avoid destroying it if possible. If you destroy it, enemies think that there's some number of people there. Even though that you don't give them direct information, they still get information if you destroy it. So if you could just, if you're sneaking up, just not get tagged by it. That's pretty simple. But if you are faking, let's say that your team is 4-person pushing A and you're alone B, you want to destroy it right away. Don't give them any information. Don't let it tag anybody. Just destroy it right away, because then they will not know how many people are there, but they know for sure at least someone is there. So it's more likely that they're not going to rotate off, because there's a possibility that like 3 or 4 of you are there and that the A push is actually the bait. So that is why you destroy it instantly if you're there. You try not to destroy it if you're not there. Now, up against drone, you want to destroy drone instantly, of course. You don't want it to tag anybody, but you need to be really ready for the follow-up. Players love to swing behind it. Sometimes they'll even flash behind it. So you have to really be ready for anything up against the drone. Don't assume that just because the drone's coming out, it's just a solo Sova, because then you're just going to get pushed or caught out by a 2-man play. Now, last up against his ultimate, remember that after you get tagged, there's a short window of time where he can actually see where you're moving. So what you want to be doing is before he fires the next shot, right before, you will actually fade from his LOS, and that is the moment when you want to actually switch your direction. So you can look like you're going in one direction, but then after you stop being able to be seen, you can change directions in between that time where his information is isolated, and he has to assume based on your last movements where you went. That is the best way to trick him out. That's the best way to survive up against Hunter's Fury. Now moving on to the next character I gotta talk about, it's Brimstone. And there's really only one tip that is is the most important tip up against the Brimstone, and it's tracking his orbital strike, and in some cases his molly as well. And the reason you do this is because you play fundamentally different for the defuse. Like, if a Brimstone has like a molly rollout or he has orbital strike, he's more likely playing really far away from the spike in a 1v1 when you have to defuse. That means that you don't have to be as afraid of the close angles because he's not going to be playing those close angles because he has his ultimate. And two, you have to put pressure on the spike as soon as possible because you need to exhaust his ultimate. If you check all these close angles, check, then go to the spike, then try to defuse, then he ults, it puts more pressure on you, or you don't even have enough time to defuse. So definitely be thinking about this. This is the #1 thing that you need to be thinking about up against the Brimstone. Ask if he has orbital strike or just pay attention to it pre-round. You could see it based on how many kills he got or how many orbs he grabbed. You could predict if he has it or not. Like if he was a 1 away, he probably grabbed an orb. So definitely keep this in mind and you're gonna have a lot better time against Brimstone. Now moving on to the next character I gotta talk about, it's Breach. There's really not that much to talk about against Breach. One, his flashes are pretty easy to run 80. If you just watch for his flashes, you can 180 dodge the flashes just like that. They're actually the easiest flashes to 180 in my opinion. Generally though, up against the Breach as a playstyle tip, you really can't be playing close areas up against the Breach. Like if you're positioning, typically you like to play in hookah on defense. Against the Breach, that could be a really big liability because pretty much his entire kit does the exact same thing, which is forces people out of corners or punishes people for being in corners. Like, that's it. So why would you want to be playing these tight corners up against a character that has one thing he does, and it's that thing? So that's all I'm saying up against Breach. That's pretty much the entire tip that I have for him. But if you just play a more far away reserve playstyle, he's going to spend all of his time checking all these corners with his abilities, but no one's going to be there. So he's the one who just wastes his time on a character who just does one thing. Now for the last character, we got to talk about Viper. Now realistically, if the enemy's playing Viper, you already won. No, I'm just kidding. Viper's probably gonna get a lot of buffs soon. Hopefully she doesn't get an ability rework, so these tips don't make any sense. But typically, if you're talking about Viper's toxic screen, the biggest downside to that ability is something that you can really take advantage of. And that's the fact that once it's placed down, it's way more likely that they're gonna push that site. And it's a lot easier for you as someone on the defensive side to reposition where she puts the toxic screen down. Let's say you have a very split comp, but you have a double up somewhere because you just have to have that way. Like you have a double up B, double up A, and one mid. If she puts her toxic screen down on one place, then it's going to be pretty obvious that that is more likely for them to push there. And if they don't push there, they're not going to be able to use toxic screen. So either way, it's definitely better to either send one person over. You're not going to send both, but send one, or make it less likely that you're going to rotate off, because sometimes people will lay down the toxic screen, they'll play one place, and then eventually they'll rotate back at the exact same time. So that's just one small tip that could definitely help you in your games up against Vipers. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed the video. Smash that like and subscribe if you learned even a single thing, and definitely let us know in the comments down below if you're a god tier player and you have a special tip against any character in the game, maybe another tip that we didn't mention here. Definitely let us know in the comments down below so the GameLeap community can learn from your valuable insight. Thanks so much for coming by. That's all we got for you today. I'm Coach Mills, and of course, until next time.